Hey, welcome back, everyone. Just a friendly reminder for all the participants to type your questions in the chat. At the end of the session, our media specialist, Jason Harper, will read the questions off to the presenters in the order they are received. I'm so excited for our next session, how school districts function, the board, and the superintendent. Joining us today are Superintendent Shadrick from Converse County School District number 2 and Trustee Casey Tillard from Converse County School District number 2. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here, and the floor is all yours.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having us. I have to preface this by saying you're going to get the Converse number 2 version of the guardrails that we were given. So if we do or say anything that maybe is a little different than what you experience in your home district, I would just encourage you to do that. But I think pretty for the most part, most of everything that we're going to do is pretty I guess, plain Jane. So I'm Coley Shadrick. I'm the superintendent here in Glen Rock and Converse 2, and I have my school board chair, Casey Tillard. And I'm just going to tell you, when we were asked to do this, I think the power of what we have in Converse 2 is the board and the superintendent relationship. And so obviously we have different functions, but I think the fact that, the communication that we have and the understanding and the collaboration is how it all works. I don't think there's any part of what we do that, we're probably not both informed about, but, at some point there are some different decisions and different things that the board does versus the superintendent. So I'll kind of let Casey introduce himself and speak about the board.
Yeah, I'm Casey Tillard. I'm the board chair here in Glen Rock. I've been on the board 12 years. I've been the chairman for about 8. Like Coley said, we might do things different here than in other districts, but it's all kind of the same broad picture. Our board, basically our function as a board is to take in community input, and we hire one person, and it's our superintendent. And the chain almost works backward as a board member. We hear from the community, we hear from people, we tell our superintendent, and then it's his job to let it go down. It's not our job to go talk to teachers and try to fix things. We have one guy that works for us. We set the long-term vision, policy, kind of the big picture items, and we develop our governance, set policies. That's kind of our job. Our job is not to get into the schools and try to monkey with teachers. I'm a rancher by trade. I'm a dad. I have 3 kids in our district that have all gone K through 12. Well, 2 of them are juniors right now, and then I have a 6th grader. So involved that way. But yeah, mainly our job is to kind of set the big picture, the North Star, whatever you want to call it, and then let our superintendent do the legwork.
I'll just kind of tell you, like, one of the things that, just kind of in talking about governance, one of the things that we have done in the, probably initially when I got here, there was a strategic plan and a lot of community involvement and a lot of, I guess, feedback regarding kind of what we do as a district. So that's something that we have kind of re-engaged with here in Converse 2 is the strategic plan to try to get, what we do here in Glen Rock in terms of our public education and what are priorities for us. And so I think that's a really, really important part of this, is to make sure that your governance and your policies align with obviously where you're headed as a district. And so that strategic plan is super important. And I think it's going to be dependent upon your community. We're a smaller community. We have a different clientele and different resources than our 2 neighbors behind, on the other side of us. But, for the most part, we all deal with curriculum the same. We all deal with, governance the same. It's just sometimes our focus is a little bit different and unique to our clientele. So when the board does set that policy or set that governance, it's, I would say the School Boards Association, Wyoming School Boards Association, provides a lot of guidance in regards to model policies and making sure that we have things that are aligned with state statute. Obviously, the legislative session just ended, so a lot of new changes. They are making sure that we have that new policy. It's written in compliance with it. Their legal team does it. And so, a lot of the things are not just made up willy-nilly at the board level. There's a lot of time and preparation planned on, having the Wyoming School Boards Association give them kind of those model policies and procedures that do keep us in the guardrail. So I just wanted to kind of add the fact that, here in Converse 2, we are a leadership governance district, which means we have very, very specific roles and responsibilities. So the board does a self-evaluation on themselves every month, and I get evaluated every month on the same things. It's just a different perspective. So we have 14 items that we look at through the course of the year. And so I think that does pull together a lot of the feedback towards those very specific roles and responsibilities. So anything else you wanted to add on governance?
No, not really.
Okay. All right. So I don't know who's moving us forward, but we'll kind of talk about the superintendent for a second. So I know one of the slides coming up here kind of speaks to the board as kind of the architect and the superintendent as the kind of general contractor, but just to kind of work on the things that you see in front of you. I deal with everything operational. Like Casey said, they set my direction through policy and governance and strategic planning and budget, and then I execute those through operations. So I'm their only employee, but obviously they have a huge say in a lot of the things that I do from an operational standpoint. I believe wholeheartedly in a collaborative process and lots of communication. There's very, very few things that I do in isolation without talking to somebody from the board. My board chair is Casey, and I think we talk, if not daily, every other day. So I think that strong communication speaks to us always being on the same page. But in terms of like staffing, they'll hire and I make recommendations on the board or at the board level in regards to staffing, and they approve and terminate those things if that has to happen. But the interview process and all of the recommendations from the building and the evaluations, that's all done at kind of an operational standpoint. But when we do get those things that we're renewing contracts and renewing employment contracts and employment notices and extra duties, those are things that are voted on at the board level. So I don't do that. I kind of just do all the legwork to make those recommendations. Curriculum is a big thing anymore. I think this is one of probably the biggest topics in regards to whether or not you support your local district or not. If you think that they're going in a direction as a parent that you don't believe, I think school choice is very, very important. And curriculum is very, I'm going to call it very dictated. We've got standards that we have to meet. We've got expectations from us in regards to the school accountability model. Federal accountability model. So a lot of the things that we do aren't as, they're not as, I guess, specific to us as they are requirements of the whole state. But in regards to, the board will adopt curriculum, but that comes with a lot of parent feedback and opportunities for them to engage with it if we do go with a different vendor. The curriculums that, the priority standards and common assessments and proficiency scales that teachers work with and build, the board, acknowledges them, and we feel like it gets us to ultimately the proficiency that is expected upon us at the accountability model level at the state. And so, the strategic plan has goals, and our job at the operational level in regards to staff is to meet those expectations of the board in regards to all of the goals and curriculum. The safety and management piece of what I do is probably another really important part of it. I would say, it all goes back to a really high quality mission and vision where we want to make sure that kids are prepared for career and college and military and kind of being life ready. But at the same time, we want to make sure that's done in a safe and positive environment. So making sure that we have a safety plan and crisis plans, and we have things that, will make sure that we ensure that our environments are positive. Most of the things that we deal with are coming in regards to somebody, not agreeing with maybe, the treatment of their child at a school level and, or the, safety of their child at a school level. So that kind of flows from what I would call a chain of communication, chain of command, if you will. So if you could, kind of go on to that next slide for me, please. So again, this one just kind of speaks to the board as the architects who design the house, set the budget, kind of, have everything. And then I make sure that it runs the way they have seen it. And so that running of it. So let's go one more slide, please. I think for the most part, this is probably one of the most important pieces of what we do at a district is making sure that we can receive feedback and, provide input. I want a two-way communication, and I think this does a great job, not to, skirt responsibility or ownership of anything. It's just making sure that parents always have the ability to get the questions answered at the lowest possible level. A lot of the times that teacher has the most information regarding the behavior of their child, the instructional levels of their child, kind of what is happening day to day. Again, a parent may not approve, they may not agree with what's going on, and so they need to let that person know. And then obviously they don't get the answer that they like, then they could always appeal or go to the principal. And again, that principal is going to give you another layer of things that we do not simply have at my level and or at the board level. And so, I think one of the things about this is it's not necessarily letting people feel like they're going to get the answer they want, but I think it's the answer that is probably aligned the most with policy, the most with practice, the most with law. And so that's kind of our goal, is making sure parents get the answer that they want at the level that's most appropriate, but also at the same time, we are making sure that, we are always being aligned and following our policy and procedures and state statute. Anything you want to say here at the board level?
No, just that communication is key in all of this. As a small community, as a board member, every time I go to the post office, the grocery store, basketball games, parents in our district have a lot of access to board members. So spend a lot of time trying to direct them, and they might be frustrated, but you just say, hey, you need to go talk to the teacher or the principal. If it's policy stuff, budget questions, curriculum, then, I do my best to answer. And like I said, I'm a rancher by trade. I've been on the school board for a long time, and we have to make a lot of decisions, but I rely heavy on our curriculum director. So if there's a curriculum question, I might put them in touch with her, or, sit down together. I almost always loop our superintendent on anything. Last thing he wants to hear is, that somebody went to the curriculum director and, he wasn't informed that there was a question. So I try to communicate with him because, like I said, he's our only employee. But I do a lot of directing as far as who you should talk to, when you should talk to them. And, quite frankly, they have jobs during the day. They're teachers and principals. So sometimes parents are frustrated that they can't go meet them during that right then. But you have to realize those principals and teachers have a job to do during the day. So schedule a meeting, set it up, email. That's all a great communication. And then you have a record of your communication. That's something I always say too, is, put it in an email, copy the teacher on it, the principal, depending on where you think it needs to go. But communication is key. Frustration. And I'm a strong advocate that send your kids in first. Our kids should be able to advocate for themselves. And lots of times it's a miscommunication. If your kids will just go visit with the teacher or the principal, sometimes there's things that were just overlooked or not noticed. And it gives your kids a lot of power to go advocate for themselves.
So I'm just going to kind of give you an example. Today I heard from a board member that, he was talking to a parent over the weekend, and that parent was not happy with one of our buildings communications kind of, information towards the end of the year, and was wanting to know about coming to a board meeting. And my first question was, hey, thanks for letting me know. But has that teacher or has that parent gone to the administrator? Because at some point it wasn't the teacher that they were frustrated with, it was building level communication. So them coming to a board meeting doesn't necessarily get them what I would say the most information, and the people that need to know about it. Hey, that was inaccurate, or that wasn't enough information, or it wasn't in timely communication. So, it's important that we do direct people back, because at the same point, we don't want to wait 2 weeks for a board meeting when there's a lot of information that needs to be fixed. So I'm really hoping that, that parent does reach back out to the building level. And I encourage the board members, say, tell them, and loop me in, because then that way I can go have a conversation. Our whole goal is to make sure that we're all on the same page. People are as informed. Again, it's not that they get the answer that they want, or, that they get their way. It's the fact that we want to make sure that we're being transparent in what we do. We always have the best of intentions. There's a reason for what we do. And I think sometimes that information isn't, very well communicated on our behalf. So when a parent does reach out, it's an opportunity to inform and let them know kind of where things are coming from. I had a parent that, was not happy about, they are not just able to walk into our schools like they used to. She was reminding me, the last superintendent let me, and I don't know why you don't. Well, there's been a lot of things changed since then. And, one is, everybody that has a concealed weapons permit can, carry on school property, and we cannot ask them. We cannot find out what their training is. So I think you saw a response from a lot of school districts to protect the school day. So visitor, practices changed, communication practices replaced kind of in person, so that they could protect that during the day. Not to say that we want our buildings to be, prisons. That's not what I'm saying. I think one of the things that I tried to communicate is, we just said, hey, call, the days of just walking in and expecting somebody to, be available. I think that's, that's not very appropriate. So we have a 2-hour policy here. Hey, call, make an appointment, set that up. And that way, when you are there and somebody buzzes you in, everybody's expecting you. So, I mean, that kind of change is a response to some statute changes, things that I think could compromise school safety. We as a district talked about it, collaborated with our local law enforcement, talked about it in public meetings, and then made a change that went out to parents. So, I don't think there's anybody that would not welcome parents, being in our board meetings. We have a lot of great conversations, and I think it's great for a parent to be and just come. If you are upset about something and you've reached that level, public comment is always, appropriate for us. Every district deals with it a little bit different. I know some just kind of sit there and listen. Some, you might have some interaction. You want to talk a little bit about kind of, what we do here in Converse too when parents come or people come?
When people or parents come to our public comment, we make them sign a sign-up sheet, so who's here and why they're here to talk. We give them time to address their issues, and obviously we ask that multiple people don't talk about the same subject if it's already been covered. And there's certain questions that are asked that we might not have the answer to. It's kind of like Coley said, if you come here out of order and you're mad because you were told the basketball game started at 6 and it really started at 7, well, we can't answer that right here. Coley's going to have to go look into that and find out why. But there's some questions that if we can answer, our superintendent, a lot of times our administrators are in the building, we'll try to answer them best we can. But if it's going to have to take a lot of detail, we'll just thank them for their input, tell them who to contact, and Coley will start going down the chain and trying to figure out where and how to answer that question the best. So that's kind of how we do it. For the most part, you're not going to gain any huge insights with a public comment. Your feelings will be heard, addressed, and I think there's some frustration there sometimes. But to be honest, most of those questions we have to wait and give our superintendent some instruction and say, hey, go dig into that. Come back to us, tell us where it fell down, what happened, what was the problem. Unfortunately, we can't always give an answer during a meeting. So a lot of that stuff is heard. I think sometimes you feel like maybe it wasn't listened to, but just because we can't give you an answer does not mean that we are not looking into it. Because at least in our district and most every other districts out there, we're a part of the community too. And our number one goal is to make the best decisions for kids of our district. That's primary. I mean, that's our most important goal, is to do what's best for every student in our district. So that's our mindset on this board. That, and be good stewards of the money, because that's kind of our job, is to make sure that money is spent and spent best on children.
I think the only thing that I would add to that is, at a board meeting, one of the things that we don't get to talk about in public meetings is specific kids. or specific teachers. So a lot of the times, a parent will come and they'll be unhappy with, maybe the treatment of their child by somebody. They can sit there and kind of talk about their kid all they want, but we can't respond. We can't really ask people to talk about their kid in public meeting. We don't talk about kids in public meeting. We don't talk about adults in public meeting. Those are all kind of executive session kind of conversations. So, it's pretty vanilla information that we do talk about, just due to that confidentiality. So
yeah, and the other thing you hit on it earlier is public involvement. We have these work sessions and listening sessions and public meetings to get input on curriculum and things. And very seldom do we get a lot of participation. So something we did as a district a couple of years ago was we purposely started recognizing 2 kids from every building, our star students, our RAM student of the month, and invite their parents, grandparents to the beginning of the board meeting. We recognize them, and we have a lot more parent participation due to that. We invite them all to stay. They're welcome to leave after their kids are recognized, and most of them do. But we've actively tried to engage more parent involvement in our meetings, and we get a full boardroom for that recognition, but most of them do leave afterwards. But just to try to get them familiar, it's a little intimidating to come into a board meeting sometimes. We're just trying to get them to realize that, hey, we're parents and community members too. We're no experts. We're just here to listen and try to do what's best for kids. So highly encourage, even if you don't have an issue, go to a school board meeting or two and just sit in on them, see what happens. I think you might be bored, but it would be interesting to know what goes on. And I think it would be good just take an evening and go attend one.
I know for us, a lot of the times I think our audience get talked to and get questions asked, because a lot of times we'll be talking about things. Again, this is kind of our district. I don't want to speak to every district across the state, but as we're sitting here talking about salary and benefits, or we're talking about things going on with funding or activities, or you name it, as we kind of try to keep I try to keep the board up to speed on something. There may be audience members that are in the audience that the board will ask questions of. And so we can, I think it's a great opportunity for input, and, not necessarily prepped, but at the same time, they're there and they're a stakeholder. And sometimes that's very valuable when they're there. Yeah. So, but no, I think this district communication is probably one of the bigger ones. And I think you can apply it to any situation, if your kids are in activities, if you talk about anything, put it in whatever, I guess, perspective you want. It's always appropriate to kind of go to that person that has the most information, and then move up the chain from there. And then Casey kind of mentioned it, when they do hear from people, they kind of start it backwards. So they'll talk to me, and then I'll go to that building principal, and then they'll probably go to the teacher, and then we try to, and I guess I kind of go back and let the board know how things were affected. So I guess one of the, kind of moving through some of these things pretty fast, but I don't know. I know we have time for questions, but I'd rather address their questions than sit here and speak to something that maybe, they don't feel is appropriate. So, this is another slide in regards to just kind of making sure that you go to the source. And then obviously, if you don't get your needs met, or you don't get the information that you're expecting, then, move it up the chain as appropriate. Again, I don't expect people to have, go to the teacher, don't get the answer they want, and then just be stuck. If they want to make sure their input is heard, go to that principal, and then come to me, and then come to the board. It's just very, very hard if we're in a board meeting, and again, the board's not aware of what's going on, because I don't have the appropriate way to update them when those things come up. I would say probably the other thing that in regards to policy, a lot of the things we deal with is policy, and those are the things that are kind of the crux of what we do. Everything is grounded in policy and/or regulations, procedures. We have to make sure that we're always, consistent. And so I know here in Glen Rock and Converse too, any new policy is up for first reading and review on the first meeting. And then the second one, we don't, we can act on it. If it's an existing policy that we're revising, then what we'll do is it will go out and we'll, be able to pass that in one meeting. So 2 meetings for a new policy, 1 meeting for revision, and or if we retire one. Our online platform for board meetings, policies, minutes, procedures is Simbly. I think there's probably not a district out there that's not using some kind of online board software. I know Board Docs, I know Simbly. Everything is very appropriate to go read, and being transparent. Honestly, the agendas are full of information, and so I always try to point people to go to that first. So anyway, let's take some questions. You ready for questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we got first question here. How do you hand chain of command when the issue is the principal who is also the superintendent? Half of the board of trustees thinks he can do no wrong, while the other half have a strong dislike for him, and it's dividing our school.
Well, I guess I could talk a little bit as a board member. I can't give you a specific answer because we are not in that situation. Our principal and our superintendent are 2 different people. I guess my advice to somebody in that situation would be, hey, sit down with them, see if you can't come to some sort of consensus. And if not, then it's the board. I mean, there is a chain of communication, we call it here in Glen Rock. You start with the teacher, the principal, the superintendent, and if you still don't like what you've heard, that's when it comes to a board level. And sometimes you may have to have an executive session with that parent, that superintendent / principal. I don't know, that's a unique situation to me. I can't tell you specifically how we would deal with it, but as board chair, if I was in that situation, that's probably what I would ask for. At some point, I'd just tell my superintendent / principal, hey, this parent cannot come to a consensus with you. Obviously, it has reached the board point, so we will have a meeting.
I can tell you, we could probably answer that in relation. I have one other duty. I'm transportation director. So, if it were, they had a problem with the transportation director, who is me, how would you deal with it?
Well, first of all, I would call him up and say, hey, what's going on? I mean, there's a problem with you as transportation director. You're also the superintendent. So sooner or later, we may have to step in if you cannot resolve this. And I would highly encourage him to go back and resolve it with the knowledge that we as a board know what's going on. So obviously this parent has not gotten any resolution on this situation. So you either need to figure it out, or it will come before our board and we will have to make a decision basically for you and tell you how we want it handled as a board. And that would all be based off of our policy. First and foremost, we would sit down and be very black and white. This is what our policy says. And that's how we would dictate it as a board. We would look through the policy with the parent and their superintendent / transportation director and say, this is what our policy says. This is what we will follow. And if there isn't anything in policy, that is probably where we would reach out to the WSBA or other districts and see what's in their policy, and may have to adopt more policy on that situation. Sometimes you don't know what the problems are until they happen. And then sometimes you have to work backwards, and that's why you have a board, is to figure out what the best answer would be in that situation.
I think, Casey made a great point, which is, again, that might be, an executive session comment or a topic, because obviously nothing like that would be happening in public meeting. But, the board chair can, call into session and executive session to discuss that personnel item.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So I don't know if we've helped answer that question, but we're kind of in that same unique situation where when there is no, I guess a lack of layers, then, I think the board steps in and, you just get to them sooner.
All right, we got a second question here. What trainings have you done to help learn the roles and responsibilities of your positions?
That's a good question.
Well, I guess for me, I go to the WSBA conference every year. I've had to do the board training that the state has mandated now. And then once a month, the first Tuesday of every month at noon, they have a board chairman Zoom meeting. It's board chairs from around the state with WSBA. I've made a lot of them. I haven't made them all, but I do that. Networking, all kinds of breakout sessions. I have my previous chair called them, basically
Charm school.
Charm school camps. But you go there and you learn. And Sue Bellish started it with the WSBA when I first started. Now there has been multiple members, but every year we go to WSBA. They have a lot of good information out there. And then I've been a chairman long enough and on the board long enough. I've got to know other members from around the state and talk to them and see what they're doing in their district. What's working, what isn't. COVID was huge. Reach out and say, hey, are you guys in person? Are you Zoom? What are you doing? How are you working it? Did you move it to a bigger building so you could spread out, or did you just go to Zoom? Reach out to the WSBA and, Scott Kolpicki, our attorney. A lot of what we have to deal with is legal, and you have to make sure you don't step into something you can't. So lots of times we reach out to the attorney. WSBA is probably our best resource, and Brian Farmer is a genius. So you ask him. If Brian Farmer doesn't know, then you start asking other questions to other people, or he will find out. So that's been my experience.
I think the other one is we, whenever we have a new board member that is elected to the board, we'll bring WSBA in district. And that is one of the things that we talk about is roles and responsibilities, leadership, governance. We do a lot of scenarios. One of the things that Casey mentioned with the school boards conference is there is a specific section or session on just how to be a board member, new board member training, because it is different. It's pretty overwhelming. But we consistently bring School Boards Association in to do that on roles and responsibility a lot.
And then we also do some PLC training. We've brought in some people to talk to us about that. Anything we're trying to do district-wide with our teachers as a board, we have tried to bring in experts to help us. So we at least know the lingo. We at least know what's going on and what we're expecting of our teachers and our administrators, because you hear about all these new ideas with school. There's always a
silver bullet.
Yeah, a new silver bullet out there. So you got to be really careful. You just don't want to implement anything under the sun. So I think it's important for us as a board to kind of see how that's going to work and what we're asking our staff to do.
Our next question is, when it comes to reducing teaching numbers and classes offered, who in the chain of command would you recommend starting with? And in this particular situation, the positions and classes were cut and the people were not informed beforehand.
Well, in our district, a lot of that is dictated by funding. And so when we're in a budget session and we're trying to, like I said, make the best decisions for our kids, but we only have X amount of dollars to do it with. It kind of depends. Are they core teachers? Do you have to have those classes? Are they elective? And sometimes, like, we haven't had music for a year or two because we just couldn't get a teacher to apply. We could not get one. Short of going out and kidnapping somebody, we just couldn't do it. Nobody applied. So sometimes those decisions are made for you based on staffing situations. But we haven't had to riff for years. So typically it kind of comes down to who you can get in a small district. Like, you might offer welding, and if that teacher retires and you don't have another welding teacher, you have to go out and try to find one. And if you can't, then you might find somebody who can teach a wood shop or an auto mechanic. We're not allowed in small districts to have a ton of teachers. You're funded based off your ADM. So sometimes it is very much teacher specific, and sometimes you get those golden teachers that can teach everything, but you have to cover your core classes: math, English, science, reading. Those are the important ones according to the state and the standards, which I would agree with. But sometimes those electives are a little hard to go find somebody that can do it all. And statewide, music teachers have gotten hard to find. Art teachers, ag teachers, they're not everywhere. So that is how a lot of it's done. I don't know if that answers your question, but obviously if you have a complaint as a parent, like, you would like to see a VOAG class offered that that isn't there. You know, you want a specific welding class or auto body class. You know, I would come to your board. I would visit with your superintendent, because those are district-wide decisions, and you know, you might get asked to sit on an interview committee to find out who's actually out there, and maybe there's no applicants. So I would definitely reach out to your superintendent, probably first of all, and your board, and just ask, you know, why do we not have this class? And if one is being cut, then I would also reach out and say, hey, this is very important. And you might find out that, hey, that teacher retired and we don't have anybody to replace it.
And I do think that that's great. I mean, so in our district, we around April, when we're looking at budgets, I will bring to the board enrollment and, you know, how many kids are in each class at the high school. Intentionally have those conversations and to be very transparent about kind of where our numbers are and what funding looks like. It usually aligns with when the legislative session ends and school funding model applications. There's a lot of changes this year, but I would say if something got cut and you did not know about it, I'd probably start at the board level, because that is at some point something that they voted on based on a recommendation from somewhere. That's why we bring it to a board meeting, so it's transparent and we have those honest conversations. I know people felt like we were cutting music, and we got some letters, and I think we all talked about, like, hey, it was an opportunity to let people know, like, we are not trying to cut anything. We just can't find somebody. So that's kind of what we do.
Well, and you have to have a very honest conversation too, is there might be somebody out there, but are they good? And do you want them with that group of kids? Like, there might be a high school band teacher and you're looking for a grade school music teacher. Sure, they're a music teacher, but they might not be a good fit for those grade school kids. That's all something, like I said, you might get asked as a parent if it's that important to you. We bring parents in on our interview committees all the time for teaching jobs, administrator. So yeah, if you have a passion for it, you might get asked to sit in on one of those. So I know that's what we do in our district.
Yeah. I'd start with the board on that one. I think that's a very good, you know, that's an example of a district decision.
Our next question. Do board members independently review state complaint or due process results that the public can view on the WDE site?
I don't know if I know.
I guess I would need a few more details on that. I don't know that we've had.
I mean, like, let's talk about special ed is the first thing that comes to my mind on that. Is if somebody, a SPED parent, were to submit a SPED complaint to the Department of Ed, I know I inform the board of that process and kind of what's going on. Again, my whole goal is transparency. It's not something that can be a public meeting. It's usually for kids, it's personnel, but I would say regardless of what's going on, that decision from a complaint will have an impact on the board at some level if there's required training or required action. So they have to know about it at some point I think they need to know about it in the process, but at the conclusion, it could require them to take action.
Yeah, and I just don't know that we've ever had one go that far. We have been notified of some complaints, and then usually, I don't think we've ever gone to arbitration or anything like that, but yeah, we are notified when there is a complaint. We definitely know about it. And then a lot of times the state will look into it with our SPED director, because, like, I'm specifically thinking of SPED also. And those are usually, when we are informed, it's usually in an executive session, because that is very much about a student, a staff member. But yes, we are informed, and typically we kind of, you know, take our guidance from the state at that point. You know, they have experts that look into that. And as a board, that's what we heavily rely on, is, like I said, because we're not experts in this. So you rely on guidance and feedback from the state. Typically those are investigated. And that's what we very much lean on.
I think the same is true with PTSB. If there was ever a complaint in regards to a staff member, usually I get notified. I always let the board know if the PTSB is investigating a staff member, because again, it could lead to somebody not having a license. It could lead to some kind of discipline that would affect their performance. But, you know, that's my job as a superintendent, is to inform them, because there may be some required action of those agencies at the conclusion of their investigation.
And then legally, we've been advised by attorneys, I don't know that this ever happened, but sometimes if it does come down to arbitration, we need to be a fairly neutral party, kind of like a jury. So sometimes you can't be told too much in case it is going into that situation. But for the most part, like I said, we've never had to deal with that. But that is something like during our board member training, we're warned about that. And, if something is going to end up in arbitration, and we as a board are going to have to sit and listen to that, we need to be able to be fairly neutral. Obviously, if it's something and they need removed from the building right now, we're going to know about it. But that we very heavily rely on the state and their guidance as they investigate it. I don't know if that answers your question. And maybe we went down the wrong example, but those are the ones we've had to deal with.
For the next question, what do parents do when the board and superintendent aren't responding to their questions?
I'll take this one. I think I don't know if I've ever had a situation where the board hasn't responded. Usually it is, if they've reached out to me and they don't feel like I've responded to them, then they'll reach out to the board. I immediately get a phone call from the board going, hey, what's going on? And there's that accountability for me to respond if I have not. The only time I can ever think of a time where we have not responded in unison is if it's been something that we can't talk about, regards personnel or student. But I think then it's at least, hey, sorry, we're in receipt, but we haven't, we can't talk about this due to, advice from legal. That's the only time I really think about it.
And sometimes as a board member, I guess maybe I've been accused of not responding timely, but you have to remember most board members, this is a volunteer thing, and most of us have day jobs and work and kids and other things. So if you email me at noon or call me at noon, and I'm like this morning we were Brandon, if I'm doing something, you might have to wait till that evening, or, I'm famous, I get up real early. So that's when you might hear from me. And I apologize that I'm not Johnny on the spot, but sometimes, most board members have day jobs, and this is a volunteer gig. So most of our board is pretty timely in responding. And to be honest, most of our response as a board is like, hey, thanks for reaching out. It sounds like you need to go talk to the principal, or that sounds like a teacher issue. You need to visit with your teacher. If you don't get any satisfaction there, move up to the principal, superintendent, and then to us. Or if it is very much directed at, like I say, it's, like we talked about earlier with a class offering, then I will do my best to respond. And I might even invite you to one of our work sessions. We do a work session once a month, and either on the budget, all kinds of things. Yeah. So I might invite you to a work session so you can get more details on that. But we do try to respond very timely. But I guess if you are not being responded to, I don't know what to tell you. I would ask, keep hassling your board or your superintendent. Like one time I had a parent tell me that Coley wasn't responding. And I said, well, are you aware that he's at a national superintendent's conference he's out of state. He is there. So he has his computer. He will get back to you eventually. And turned out he did, but he was doing his job that day and couldn't get back to him right then. So,
but I don't think, I think there's a lot of, from my standpoint, my job is to keep their phone from ringing. That's how I look at it, is be as responsive, be as accommodating, be as available as I can. But if I'm not doing my job to get back to somebody, I know when they hear from a parent, I'm going to get called on the carpet for sure.
And that's how it works here. And, and unfortunately in every profession, sometimes you just have people that aren't going to respond or do their jobs. And as a board, having a chairman or the entire board finally just come down and you can actually censure a board member. It's pretty rare, but it's usually very board specific. And I guess if that is an issue in your district is happening, I would go to the public comment session and just say, hey, I have reached out to you and the board, and nobody's responding to me. And then I bet you get a response then.
So the next question, what evaluation process do you use for your board? The commenter expressed frustration that their board used to do monthly evaluations and has since stopped. And only two members participated in a training that was offered recently.
There again, I guess that boils down to, in every profession, you have people that take it serious and work hard at it. And as far as a board member, if you don't like what they're doing, vote. I mean, you show up to the ballot box and change seats. That's what we do as a board. I mean, the public is our boss. If they don't like it at election time, reelect somebody else. But we use a self-board evaluation that we kind of developed. What year was it? The state changed the way we had to do superintendent evaluation.
17, 18, I think.
Yeah, 17, 18. So we just tied ours with his. So if it's a board governance, if it's over the budget, if it's whatever that is, ours ties in with him. And sometimes we're pretty hard on ourselves, and ours is a 1 through 5. And anything below a 3, just our board rule is you have to comment on it. And then we have the ability to go into executive session and talk about the evaluation every month, because there's a piece that we take off a month in the summer, and then the month right after elections when you have brand new board members. So there's 2 months that we take off where we don't do evaluations. But on our self-evaluation, if anybody answers below a 3, they have to put why. And then as a board, we talk about it. And sometimes it's I think as our board, we have a pretty good trust and working relationship. So you can kind of call somebody on the carpet and like, hey, I don't feel like you're doing a good job here. You're not showing up prepared. You're not reading the agenda. You're constantly late. And we have a set of expectations for our board that we are expected to follow. And we set those for ourselves, and we hold each other accountable. So every district's different. That's how we do it. And I don't think I could be out of line here, but I do not think there is any regulations that say boards have to evaluate themselves. You have to evaluate your superintendent, and you have to hit certain criterias. And we just modeled ours after his. We thought if it's good enough for him, we need to make sure we're doing a good job and getting him the best information we can.
Yeah, I think I love the monthly feedback, and I like that we're talking about the things that we're supposed to. A lot of the times evaluations are based on, it's one time a year, then whatever happens that year or whatever complaint they hear the latest is the one that gets captured. I love the criteria based on our roles and responsibilities. It allows me to do my job better. And,
Yeah, and ours is very much tied to our board governance manual. I mean, we take pieces out of that and, make sure we're doing a good job. And we are hard on ourselves. And it's led to some really good work. Sometimes we brought the WSBA in to help us work on some things, like board expectations, etiquette, and we expect them in our board meetings too. If somebody's on your phone and you're playing a game or you're checking scores, I might actually call on you and ask you what the score is. And if you don't mind, you take it outside. But we are in a boardroom to do business, and we have expectations in our boardroom.
So the next question goes back to the question about state complaints and due process. How are boards informed of such complaints and the results of those processes?
It kind of depends on the agency, and I think the type of complaint. I can tell you, I know of 3 areas. I know of PTSB, I know of special ed, and then audit. If they're going to come and do an audit of something regarding federal funds, he gets an email. I know when it comes down to a SPED complaint, I don't know if you get an email.
Yeah, depending on the severity. Yeah, I have gotten emails on that. Sometimes I've gotten letters.
Yeah. So I think it depends on kind of where that level is. Obviously, if it were in regards to me, they would be notified every time. If it's regarding a dismissal of somebody, I do believe I don't think they depend on me to get that information to them. I think the board chair is clued in, if I'm not mistaken.
Depending on the situation. I have gotten letters. I get emails we had an audit on our ADM to do with free and reduced lunches, and I got an email on that. And I panicked. I called Coley and our business manager and hey, what's going on here? And they said, oh yeah, that we had a kid and we had him enrolled he was off by a day. So we're being audited on our daily ADM for funding for free and reduced lunches. So I can't give you specific examples, but as board chair, I have been notified by multiple agencies about different things.
Yeah. I don't know at what level they have to, and that's the part I don't know. I know for me, whenever like special ed, if it's involving legal or a staff member, I absolutely let them know, because at some point it may mean that we need to actively discipline somebody. Or when I engage legal, I always let them know, because that's funding.
Well, and I can't get into too many specifics, but we got a special ed complaint. Oh, it was a year and a half ago probably, and it had to do with services. They were getting services through Medicaid that they also wanted through the school, and the school couldn't provide them, but Medicaid could, and so that there was a complaint, and basically the state at some point just said, hey, that's not the school's responsibility to provide that. You get that through Medicaid, through the waiver program, and we were informed of that, but that's where it played out. The parent got it resolved through the state, and they just got some clarification on that. Like, yeah, the school district does not do that. That particular piece of equipment would be provided through Medicaid. That's the one I can think of off the top of my head, that we were alerted that there had been a complaint filed, and then we were informed that, it was handled, and here was the result.
I think that would probably be a question I would ask, like PTSB, special ed, at what level they have to notify the board. I know I always do, but.
All right, next question. So with the exception of items that have to be dealt with in executive session, are there agenda items that can be hidden from the community? For example, this person's local board agenda is available online, but the community is not allowed to see or read department reports, employment reports, etc., unless they request permission from the superintendent. And then kind of as a second question, how do you handle open meeting laws, like when the meeting is viewed online? Can access be denied to people?
Good question.
That's a good question. We don't do our meetings online. Our meetings are in person in our boardroom. So I can't tell you how that would work. We've always done ours in person. Even through COVID, we did some Zoom meetings, but for the most part, ours are in person, and we are not televised, YouTube, Zoom.
I can tell you the only things that are confidential in our district. Obviously, executive session items that are personnel, safety, students,
legal, and real estate.
And real estate. Outside of that, like all of our department level reports, people that we're recommending. Recently we changed how we do like letter of resignations, because sometimes people will talk about other employees, or they'll talk about other things that I think is venturing in that confidential area. So like the letter itself, we make confidential so the board sees it, but that name of who is being, who is asking me resigned is public. I mean, it comes down to open meeting law. Yeah. I mean, anything that should be in public, you should have access to.
Our budget, our financial reports, all that is just open to anybody that wants to click on it. In fact, sometimes as a board member, I will get on my agenda on my computer and realize I'm not logged in, and I saw everything that the public saw. I mean, there was nothing on there that the public could not see, even though I was not logged in. I was just on the open. And then I'll realize halfway through the meeting I'm not logged in, and I'll log in. But I'm very much looking at the same agenda the public is. Like Coley said, once in a while there is a resignation letter, and sometimes there's spouses that work here, and it might be as simple as saying, hey, my spouse got a job in another district, but they did talk about another employee. So kind of flirting with it. So just be on the safe side. We say who's resigning in the open meeting, and we vote on it publicly, but their actual specific letter to the board, it's usually addressed to the board and to the superintendent, that has been kept confidential, just kind of as a best practice to make sure that in case they do mention another staff member or person, that that's about the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, I think I literally think I don't know why you wouldn't be able to read that, because it's all open. Whatever, if it's not something that can be talked about in executive session, you should be able to have access to it electronically
And we've even asked the attorneys at the WSBA conference, and it's kind of a gray area because in a small district like this, if you have one Spanish teacher and you're talking about the Spanish program, you're basically talking about one person. But I think unless you specifically name them by name, you can talk about the Spanish program, and you have to do that in an open meeting. But if you're talking specifically about that teacher, then it needs to be executive session. But in a small district, sometimes your English program at the high school, you might have 2 teachers. So it's kind of a fine line, but we have asked attorneys, and that's kind of, if you're talking about the program, it needs to be an open session. If you're talking about a specific employee, then it's executive session.
Right. We have one final question for this session. Do you guys have any suggestions for boards who are struggling to get their members to participate in trainings, to get them more engaged with those trainings?
Bring in the WSBA. We've had multiple of them over the years, and then our self-evaluations were great for that. You have some very candid conversations with some of your board members, and sometimes you find out they might have personal things going. They might have a job, and it's gotten hard for them to get here, and they may end up having to step off. But you have to have that conversation as a board, and I think you need board leadership that will have those conversations. That would be my advice. If I'm a board member and I'm frustrated with some of the participation of my members, you just have to talk about it. You can't pretend and hope it goes away. You have to bring it up, and it has to be a conversation.
I think the first step that I would say is schedule something local first. I think going places is hard, and we've found that if I can bring training to them, we have dinner, and I think that's another part is maybe the time that you do it. But yeah, bring it local. Start with School Boards Association. There's a lot of them that we try to inform on the professional learning community model, but we bring in-house first. And now I think for us, our next step is actually going with staff to certain trainings, and that's our next step. But I feel like we do a good job if it comes to us.
But we brought WSBA in, and that's who helped us set our expectations and goals as a board. And that we were very deliberate about that. Like, hey, we need to work together as a board. We brought WSBA in, and they helped us set our own goals. And that one of our goals is to show up on time and be prepared. And if somebody walks in late consistently and they're not being prepared, you just say, hey, expectations. That's kind of the code word, I guess, is expectations. And most of the time they realize it, they apologize, they had an emergency at work, but if it continues to happen, that's when, as a board, you go through that evaluation that we do, and you just have a candid conversation about it.
I think that's the one thing that comes up on the one with the board is we need to be better about going to PD. Yeah. But I would say local first, and then, start there. Start with, PLC always starts with norms and expectations and collective commitments. And we did that at the board level. And I think that helped a lot.
Yeah.
So.
Superintendent Shadrick and Trustee Tillard, we are so grateful for you to hop on. That was a very informative session. Again, many thanks. And I apologize that we were not able to answer all questions, but we will be getting prepped for our next session at 2:00. And this will be our transition period. Thank you again so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody can reach out if you have questions.